Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection, the local interview show to bring our work in the legislature back home to Windham County here, brought to you by BCTV and all the good folks that are working in our community, especially during this time of COVID. We are getting ready for the new 2021 session with the election now passed. And to start off, we're going to be looking at the coming year and hopes from the perspective of our local representatives. And today our guest is Representative Sara Coffey from Guilford and Vernon.
Hi, Mike. It's great to be with you. It's in a new way. Normally we'd be in the studio, but this is great to have the opportunity to talk with you and to talk about what's coming up in the session and what we're thinking about.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before how the tech people at the State House have done an amazing job to allow us to do our work online, and they were recognized nationally by how quickly they were able to get this up and running in comparison to what other states are going through, and we are really dependent on them and grateful for the great work they're doing. So hats off to them.
Absolutely. And I think one of the silver linings, we're finding a lot of silver linings where we can, right? One of the silver linings is that our constituents can also watch a lot of our meetings and deliberations on YouTube more easily. And so there is some wonderful improvement in terms of transparency with this change, even though our work is very relational. It's about the relationships between each other, and it's challenging to do it on Zoom for sure.
It is. I mean, we lose the interactions, the cross-pollination, being able to speak with people in our own caucus, with people in the Republican and Progressive caucus, and that's all helpful. It's part of the process, and I do miss that. But on the other hand, like you said, it's easier for our constituents to Zoom in or to even participate if they want to give testimony. And I would advise people now, if you're interested in giving testimony, if there's a bill or an idea that you want to have us take a look at, now is the time to get in touch with us. We're having bills drafted even as we speak, and it's time, and we encourage you to be part of the process.
That's great. That's a great segue to what we wanted to talk about, because I think at this time of the year, we're coming off of a campaign cycle, and that's a time when we really do a lot of outreach to our constituents, and we get to hear what's on their minds, and we carry those voices into our work in the legislature. And we're in the process of electing new leadership in the House. And I'm excited about the folks who are running, and the Jill Krowinski, who's going to be the new Speaker of the House, we imagine. And my priorities have been, I represent 2 small rural communities, and I think obviously we have a lot of challenges. The pandemic is the main backdrop to our work, and so the health and economic well-being of our communities is my top priority. And I think that's going to carry through all of the work in all of our committees. And just yesterday, we heard an update from the state economist, which really revealed, there's some good news that some of the revenue projections are ahead of some of the targets. But what was clear to me, things that you probably too heard from your constituents, is that this pandemic is not landing equally on everyone. And there are folks who are in the upper economic strata who are not feeling it at all, and seem to be having a fair amount of disposable income to spend on things like pleasure boats and things like that. That was something that stood out to me. So going into this session, I really think I'm keenly aware of some of those disparities and some of the things that I hope we can address to change them, not just for the short term, but for the long term. Like how are we going to attract and create better paying jobs? We've seen in this pandemic how essential our essential workers are. and how they are left not completely out in the cold, but they're left without a lot of protection. A lot of
Yeah.
them do not have paid sick days. They don't have paid vacations. They don't have paid health insurance. So I think those things, and we know that it's a lot of women who are in those positions, particularly, and a lot of people of color who are disproportionately impacted in Vermont.
Yeah.
So that's something that is, I'm keenly focused on, and also, I'm hoping that with the results of this election, and I was talking with a couple of people. We as a state, we very strongly supported the election of a Democratic president, a Republican governor, and then especially in the House, it's really a patchwork of, and I think it's a beautiful patchwork, so of progressives, Democrats, and Republicans. And my hope going into the session is that I'm bringing this spirit of collaboration into this next session and finding common ground, because I really think that we will have to work together to so that no Vermonters are left behind in our recovery.
Yeah, I think one of the things I took from that briefing by the state economist was the first point that health outcomes drive the economy. And one of the reasons Vermont is doing better than a lot of other states is we've adhered to the advice from our medical and science people, and we've had better health outcomes. As a nation, we haven't. And I think it was pointed out there are nations around the world whose economies have hardly been touched because they've maintained good health outcomes. And to your other point, I agree. Starting with President-elect Joe Biden, he has reminded Democrats and all Americans that middle and working class families are the backbone of our country, they're the backbone of our economy, and we need to make sure we're working for them and with them. Most especially if you look at, as you noticed, a lot of people who are frontline workers here, essential workers, don't have paid family leave. And it really pains me that we passed that last year and the governor vetoed this. It amplified how important something like paid family leave is. And I hope we get back to that this year to make sure that moving ahead, middle and working class families have that kind of protection. The other piece of it is amplified that women have taken bigger hits in this economy, mostly because they are still, even if they're out working, they're still the primary caretakers, whether it's for their own children, for aging parents. And we need to make sure that gets put into the mix as well.
Yes, because I think working families, working parents have felt the brunt of this pandemic in a particularly, heavy way. And so really that's why things like childcare, making sure that our childcare centers remain open and safe, and our schools. And I'd like to have a bit of a discussion about our schools. Our schools have done incredible work, our teachers, our staff, to make a safe and thoughtful start of the school year under some really challenging conditions that I feel like could have been improved with some better coordinated efforts. However, there's been a lot of creativity and a lot of goodwill. And in my community in Guilford, we, the teachers and with community members, did a little fundraising campaign and built all sorts of outdoor structures that would actually, it's enhancing an existing outdoor curriculum, and it's spreading to other grades. And I think it's a really creative response. And another bonus was that with some of the CARES money, something that's been on our to-do list has been replacing the HVAC system in the school, but it's always been it's the thing that gets cut from the school budget. But with those Corona Relief Fund dollars, we were able to address that. And so I think that going into this, we're right now in school budget season, and we just got a letter that gained a lot of attention in the press that came out from the commissioner from the Department of Taxes about a fear of a 9% property tax increase. And I think that we know from our work last year that the Ways and Means Committee was looking at seven different. We knew this was coming, that there would be a gap in the education fund caused by the closure of many of our hotels and businesses in the smaller, due to the pandemic, because those are our consumption taxes that go towards, in addition to our property taxes, to funding our education in our state. And we had a good conversation about yesterday to get a good sense of that picture. But there are lots of different tools and options. And I think this between the state treasurer, who's going to be focusing on perhaps a revised proposal and paying the OPEB, the pensions, the teachers and state employees' pensions, and what that will look like, and that we don't want to see that the property taxes bear the brunt of this, nor, frankly, our schools, that they cut their budgets to such a bare bones, because we're asking them to do important work. Frankly, like this is our future. Our schools are producing the future workers, the future, of our community, not just workers, but citizens of our community. And we really, it's been a really tough several months, and we can't shortchange them. So I know we'll find some good solutions in the legislature that will result in keeping our schools strong, and not putting this tax burden on the taxpayers. And there'll be a lot of compromise, a lot of discussion, and I'm looking forward to that. And I know that the House Ways and Means Committee is going to be focusing on that when we go back.
And I'm glad you brought up what a great job our educators have done in how they're tending to the future. The kids are our future. I had the chance last month to visit 2 fourth grades at Putney Central School at their outdoor classroom, and it was interesting because there are other countries in the world that have their kids outdoors all year long, including the little ones who nap outdoors in the winter. So it was wonderful to see how the teachers and the kids have pretty much acclimated to being outdoors, and not sure how much longer they're going to be able to do that. But our educators have done a great job in keeping up with education and keeping safe, because the health outcomes that we're seeing in our schools, for the most part, have been really good. So we can't say enough for the job they've done. And I agree that, this note that came out from the tax commissioner suggesting a significant increase in property taxes, I want to emphasize to people that's not a hard number. That is not the final number. And at the end of the session, we will have a number that's much lower than what's being said right now. And it will be even lower if President Biden is able to convince Congress that state budgets need to be supplemented. Right now, the challenge of the money that's been coming from Washington is it's very restricted. And it's especially restricted and different than what happened in the last recession, when President Obama gave aid to the states, and states were able to use that money to backfill holes in their state budgets. The current money isn't allowed to be used in that way, and our hope is that President-elect Biden will change that. So stay tuned for that. That's a moving target, but as you said, rest assured, we're going to be working hard to make sure working and middle-class families don't bear the brunt of that with higher property taxes. So now, last year you were on the Corrections and Institution Committee, and we have put in our requests. And is that something you're hoping to be on again?
Well, I really enjoyed my work on House Corrections and Institutions, and I'll be happy to return there if that's where the speaker decides to put me. I'm also have a keen interest in our rural economy and the creative economy and how we're going to rebuild, strengthen our downtown. So I've also put in a request to be on the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee.
Yep.
And that for a few reasons, because I think I've been involved because of my work on the Corrections and Institutions Committee. We did take up a lot of work around systemic racism and how we address that in policy and training within corrections. And through that work, I got more involved in our social equity caucus, and it's become it has always been, I've known this to be true, that it's also about the economy and opportunity and we're in terms of how we need to address racism. And, we heard the other morning, I guess it was an afternoon, from somebody from our community, Curtis Reed, who's been doing this work for a long time with the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity. And really, we want Vermont to be a place that is welcoming and supportive of businesses and people of color. And I feel like making sure that folks have equal access, or maybe even special programs to support businesses that are minority-owned businesses will be important. And so I think that'll be a huge part of the Vermont's future. With every challenge, there's an opportunity, and I think between the pandemic and then the Black Lives Matter movement, Vermonters, I think, have and myself included, have woken up to understanding more deeply how racism is operating in more subtle ways and some more overt ways in our state. And, I know I have kids who are 18 and 19, and, they're talking about where they want to live. They want to live in a place that's culturally and racially diverse. And I think, the fact that we have had a strong response to the pandemic, that it's a healthy it's a healthy state, and that we have strong schools, and that if we're a state that is open and supportive of new entrepreneurship and small businesses, and make it, and have affordable housing for working families, we will also become a more diverse state. I think it's one of our big challenges in combination with being an aging state. And I think by becoming more racially diverse, we will solve also the aging problem, because I think our children want to live in a more racially and culturally diverse place. So that's why I was interested in changing my focus potentially, and we'll see. Even if I'm not on that committee, I'm part of the Rural Economic Development Working Group, which is focuses on rural communities and economic issues. So I feel like I can help advance some of that work there.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought that point up about the racial and social equity aspects of what we're trying to do in our work going forward. And as Curtis Reed said, it's no secret that being a person of color in Vermont is hard. But one of the reasons he has stuck it out is because he feels there's the most opportunity to change things here in Vermont. I know in my town, there's no doubt that we are a dominant white town, but we're doing a lot of work to try and change that and to be open to the people of color who live here and the people who would like to come here. And we want people to know that we recognize those challenges, and we're working to be more inclusive, to look at how equitable we can be, and most especially economically. And as you point out, this is an area where people of color have been hit harder, both health-wise and economically in COVID. And if we want an economy that works for all, not just a select few, we have to make sure that it's equitable to the people of color, the BIPOC people who live here currently and who we want to bring here. So I know I've made that commitment. You have, and most of the Democrats, and we're trying to broaden that. So I think as people see that this is beneficial to all of us, hopefully this isn't a partisan issue, and we can work across party lines to move this forward.
Yes, and I wanted to add a little something that I think one of the things that I've always known through my work in the arts and cultural sector is that arts and culture are very much a part of this social and racial diversity and equity. And it was great to hear, and in Vermont, we actually have we have the Clements Farm, and we have the African American Trail, and and things like that. It's important for us as we create, as we're marketing the Vermont brand, that it is inclusive, that it's more inclusive of a more diverse representation of what we have going on here. That it's not just about the wonderful cheese and the wonderful skiing that we have here, but it's also about a rich cultural diversity and history as well. And so that's another piece of, I feel, the economic puzzle. There's supporting. We know that there are a few different sectors that are economic drivers. Technology is one, and the creative economy is another. And I think it's no secret that I'm a big champion of the creative economy. We know that our downtowns thrive when we have cultural events that not only attract people to the event, but invite people to shop, spend time, eat out in the restaurants in our communities. And, many of our cultural organizations, whether it's a club or a performing arts center, those places were the first to close, and they're going to be the last to open up. And along with, wedding venues and wedding photographers, those events-based businesses are going to need some support. And we were able to successfully get some Corona relief dollars to that sector, $5 million last year, and I was proud to be part of that effort. But I think, cultural workers are workers, like they're middle class, workers. And so as I think we need to advocate for a lot of these sole proprietorship businesses, folks who work in the gig economy, making sure that some of these safety nets that we put in place can continue a little bit longer until we get this vaccine out and distributed. So that'll be a big focus. Yeah.
I want to recognize the work you've done. Since you've come into the legislature, you've been a wonderful and effective advocate in this realm, recognizing that this is quality of life issues, but it's also economic issues, that the arts and the economy go hand in hand. So thank you for that work. And I know there's a lot of people in the arts world who owe you a debt of gratitude for your continuing and recognition how tough it is now.
Well, thank you, Mike. And, I think it's also that we in Windham County, we see it in Brattleboro, we see it in Guilford, we see it in Putney, we see it in Bellows Falls, in Londonderry, Weston, and more. So I think we see the how it impacts our communities, because it's both economic development and community development. When we're on the other side of this pandemic, coming together is going to be so important, and how we come together is going to be critical. So we hope that these places will, what we can do to support them, and alongside these other, childcare centers and all these other businesses. The other piece that I hope we could talk about too, which is a piece of the puzzle that I know is an issue you care about, is broadband. This pandemic has revealed how our school children, how seniors in our community, how small businesses, how everybody has had to rely more on the internet, and who is left, that rural urban divide that we experience with our speeds and with internet speeds. So I think this is going to be, it's been a focus of ours. I say that because I know you've been involved in this work as well. And I think it will continue to be a focus. We've made some good progress. We have in Southern Vermont, we've created a communication union district, and it's poised and it's up and running. And I think it's thanks to the hard work of our Windham Regional Commission that helped do a broadband study in collaboration with Deerfield Valley. And I think think it's something like 18 or 19 towns have joined. And I think we want to, I'm anticipating, I'm hopeful that in Congress, there'll be some funding for rural broadband. This is an issue that does unite people. It's a bipartisan, tripartisan issue in Vermont. And I think we know, and this is something that I think the administration supports as well. I think what I'd like to see with these CUDs is the way our colleague, Representative Laura Sibilia says, it's a democratization of a telecom. So this is a communication union district can deliver these services in a more affordable way that our commercial providers have not been able, they haven't been able to wire up so many of our homes in our district. So I think I'm hoping that we can get some state dollars, but also be ready for some of those federal dollars, which I hope will come flowing in with the new Biden administration.
I think it's clear what we need to do. And I think Clay Purvis, who works for the state, says that really there's two factors that stop this from happening so far: money and time. And I'm hoping again we're going to have a partner in the White House on this who takes this seriously, because it's not a partisan issue, and it's not just a rural issue, though. I was on a webinar yesterday on equity in agriculture, and there was a state legislator from Chicago who has been active in creating urban agriculture and not just backyard gardens. And one of the pieces that came up is that this has been a great opportunity for schools, because in urban areas, the internet is not accessible if you can't afford it. And we need to do more and better to make sure this really is accessible to all. If we have to send our kids home from school, if we have to send workers home to do their work, it's not going to happen on copper lines. And we're hoping that there's a big commitment from Washington, and it sounds like President Biden recognizes this and is ready to be an active partner in moving this along. I know Senator Leahy Sanders and Congressman Welch have been pushing it, but we really need the money. And the state's going to have to pony up too. I mean, I think we've identified it's a $300 million problem, and we only put $15 million in the budget last year for this. We've got to do better. Absolutely.
And I feel like it's been the process of also laying down the track, so to speak,
Yeah.
And now is going to be the time for investment in that rail.
Yeah.
So, and while we talk about a lot of the changes and a lot of our priorities, I have to say I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful because of from what I hear in my community, to hear how, in spite of some of the challenges that neighbors are, the expressions of kindness and care that people are giving to one another, how people are rethinking how they might deliver those Christmas stockings to seniors in our community, to how we feed and care for each other. I think it's, I'm really heartened by that. And I think it is really what makes Vermont such a special place. And it gives me a great hope, we will be able to come together and find that common ground and really move forward. And I'm cautiously optimistic. And I know our time is running to a close, but I think I just wanted to be sure to include that, climate change is something that's going to be big on our agenda coming up. And for me, it's both an environmental issue, and it's about we talk about environmental justice. It's about building more resiliency into our communities. It's also about developing a new sector of our economy, and also, frankly, improving and thinking creatively about our public transportation systems. There's some really interesting ideas that are coming out about how we can do that, that don't necessarily look like a rural bus route, but it could look more like a rural Uber service, So with electric vehicles. So I think I'm excited by some of the work that's coming out from inside the state and outside the state. And in spite of the governor's threat the administration's threat to bring a lawsuit against the Global Warming Solutions Act. I am heartened by the Attorney General's recent statement saying that it is not unconstitutional, and so that we will, and that we will move forward with the work of this climate council and come up, because what we really need is a climate plan. As you know, the most recent one was done in 2016 under Governor Shumlin, and it is beyond past time that we have a climate plan that so we can address the targets that we have set out to address. Without a plan, a target is not an accomplishable target without a plan, and that's what we're working towards. And I'm looking forward to that work.
Like you made the point that economic development goes hand in hand with climate actions, and moving ahead, that's where I think the next growth in our economy is going to be. Well, there's a lot of opportunity, whether it's home weatherization, and one of the things we have on the agenda for this year is to push a super blanketing of home weatherization beyond just low-income people, because we have a lot of older housing stock in Vermont, and it's time we stopped heating the outdoors, very simply. And there's a lot of economic opportunity in there, a lot in new technologies, green energies, renewable energies. And I have to say, I'm disappointed that the governor still doesn't have a plan other than saying we need a few more electric cars. It's time to walk the talk. This is a vital issue. COVID's going to go away. We're going to get on top of that, but climate's still going to be here. And it's not going away. We have to do our part. Every state does. And that's why it's important when people say what Vermont does isn't going to matter. It matters a lot. And not only do we have to do our part, but we can do our part to lead, so we can show what can happen here in Vermont. So your points are well taken, that there's great opportunities here, economic opportunities, and then a better future for our kids, for our grandkids.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Mike, it's always a pleasure talking with you. And I have to say, it's a pleasure serving with you in the House. And we have a really strong delegation in Windham County. And there's a lot of collegiality, but a lot of really smart folks who have, with some, and a few who are entering into leadership positions. And I just want to kind of surface that we have Senator Ballant moving into the Senate Pro Tem position, which is really exciting. And in all likelihood, if Representative Emily Long from Newfane will be the Democratic majority leader in the House. And Emily is from a rural district too. She has done a lot of work in education and understands the value of our small rural schools, and I feel has a really good head on her shoulders too. So I think we're really lucky in Windham County to have some good, really good folks, and that we have a really good working relationship. That's not true for all the delegations in the State House. So I count myself very fortunate.
Yeah, it's not at all true. Very few of the county delegations even meet, and we meet on a regular basis. And you're right, we have a lot of good hard workers and people who are working hard and working smart and working together. And I want to hats off to you too for what you've brought in the last 2 years. You've been a great addition to this county delegation. You represent your towns well, and you do a great job so far. So I'm looking ahead to another session where we can turn this crisis into opportunity and keep Vermont going. It's the best place I know to live, and we want to keep it that way.
Absolutely.
So I want to thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Mike.
I also want to thank the people at BCTV. Once again, they help bring the work of the State House home to you here in Windham County. And not only around this, but in so many areas during COVID, they've made the workings of our local state government accessible to you. So thanks to CORE and all the people at BCTV. to help make this possible. So thanks again, Sara. And until next time, this is Mike Lewicki.
Thank you all.